For all the latest on the SaWGuy podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell icon. Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, y'all know I am the SaWGuy, and judging from the way that I'm dressed, you know what film we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about episode 47 on Scream. So let's get this started, right?
Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
I ain't no fucking clown. That is better.
You got clear your minds. He knows what scares you.
I'm just gonna bash your brains.
What the hell? The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream.
Hell. Everybody loves popcorn.
Had to do a little quick mask change over here, you know, because Ghostface is such a horror icon that I'm just thinking, well, I can't go on with this episode with it. But don't get me wrong, Scream was one of my other favorite slasher films of all time. And there's so many reasons to look into on why it's such a great film. The fact that it came out in 1996 during when, you know, horror movies, they weren't the trend. Nobody was really giving them a chance. And then afterwards, you know, Scream came out, boom, everything blew up again, you know. So Scream really was that film that saved horror films, just all of them. And, you know, it's interesting to say, you know, and look through as I researched this episode, because I was really surprised. There was a lot of interesting things on this, you know, and as I do in every episode, I'll break down the movie for you guys and, you know, throw in all the tidbits and everything like that. And, you know, there's a lot of interesting ones that you're going to be thrilled about, because I was researching this and was like, oh shit, didn't even know that. That's a pretty cool wink, you know. But let's get started, you know. So the film Scream, right off the bat, the main premise obviously is a slasher film, right? You got the antagonist who's Ghostface. He's going around killing all these teenagers and everything. But, you know, the thing that makes this film stand out is that it's actually directed by Wes Craven. Yes, the master of horror. The guy who gave us Freddy Krueger. And so many other good films, too, you know. But it's just the fact that he put his own little touch into everything, and he brought it back in a way where he did the same 80s style, but he modernized it for the 90s, for what was going on. And it's just, whoa, oh shit, okay. So originally when this film was being developed, you're going to laugh at this, the original title of this film was Scary Movie. Which we all know what happens later on, you know, 4 years after this film came out, they made a parody film by the Wayans brothers called Scary Movie. Which, you know, is kind of an interesting little take on that, but, you know, with Scream, it was released around Christmas time of 1996. I believe it was December 20th, if I'm not mistaken. They released it around Christmas time, which is an oddball time to release any horror film, right? But they took a shot in the dark, and man, they hit a home run with it. They really did. And the film stars a number of good actors who had credibility to them. And I think that's also what made this film really stand out. So the film opens up, you know, you start it off and then it says Scream, and then you hear somebody going, ah, you know. Then you hear a phone ring, right? And you see that it's a young girl by the name of Casey. She picks up the phone, who's played by Drew Barrymore. Now, keep this in mind, Drew Barrymore at the time, she, you know, went through a lot of personal demons and shit like that. So this was one of those first films that kind of brought her up. I believe at the time she did this and Batman Forever. And she was in it for like maybe 5 minutes in Batman Forever. Same thing with this film. But what was cool is that they wanted her to be the main actor. But, you know, I guess it was either Wes Craven or her that decided, hey, no, let's throw off the audience. Let's put the big name actor, you know, in the first shot, you know. And I'll explain more because I don't want to spoil it until I get to it, right? So anyways, she picks up the phone and she hears his voice. And, you know, she's talking to him. She's like, nope, you got the wrong number. Okay. You know, and the call's back, right? And then she's like, why are you calling back? He's like, well, to apologize. Well, okay, bye. Calls back again. And then, you know, then he starts bullshitting her and kind of talking, you know, and he's like, well, what are you doing? Maybe we can talk. Maybe we can hang out sometime. And, you know, teenage girls, oh, okay, you know. So she starts talking and everything, and she's, you know, getting ready to actually watch a horror film. And so, you know, she's shaking around the old school popcorn. I don't even know if they still fucking make those. You know, it's the popcorn, like, that's on the little tray and everything. You shake it around, you throw it on the stove. I've never seen those, like, anytime recently, but... I mean, if they still make that, let me know in the comments below, because that was a good shit. They put hella butter on it, right? But anyways, back to the movie is that she's starting to talk to him, and then he's like, what's that noise? And then she says, oh, I'm going to watch a scary movie. And he goes, oh, I like scary movies. What's your favorite scary movie? The most iconic line of this whole film, And then that's when she starts talking about Halloween and everything. And what was interesting, too, about this, at the time, Dimension Films, they owned the rights to Halloween because they did H2O later on. You had Wes Craven, who owned, I think, some of the property rights of Nightmare on Elm Street. So they had talked about it in there, because, she was saying that her favorite film was Halloween, which is, the guy who stalks babysitters. And then, then he was saying something about how he liked Nightmare on Elm Street. And I thought it was classic Wes Craven wink, was that she goes, yeah, the first one was good, but the rest sucked. As y'all know from my Freddy Krueger episodes, Wes Craven, he wasn't a fan of the sequels. The true sequel that he really wanted to do, I believe, it wasn't just the Dream Warriors, but he also did Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which was pretty interesting, cool little wink. And then that's when she's like, okay, I'm going to go, bye. And then that's when he starts, making more threats and kind of freaking her out. Then all of a sudden she starts hearing noises, right? Pounding on the doorbell. And then that's when she's like, who is it? Then all of a sudden he comes back. He goes, why the hell did you even say who is it? You might as well just walk out there and take a look at something, And what I thought was cool is that it followed all the rules of horror films. Like, it kind of parodied itself, but at the same time, it followed that slasher genre, right? So the whole story goes back and forth is that, she's telling him, like, hey, you had your fun. She's flipping the fuck out now because he's, he knows a little bit more information about her. And then that's when she starts screaming, well, I got a boyfriend. He plays football. He's big. And he'll kick the shit out of you. And then, one of my other favorite lines of this where he's like, oh, I'm shaking in my boots. And then that's when he calls out, his name hasn't happened to be Steve, is it? And then that's when it's like, dun dun. I love the suspense on this music. And then, she's like, how do you know? And that's when he says, turn on the patio lights. Dun dun from the music again. I thought, what the fuck? That was just over dramatic right there. But, hey, it's a teen slasher, right? So anyway, she goes in the patio, turns it on. She sees her boyfriend. He's all, like, beating the shit out of her, like, tied down and everything. She's, like, trying to go out to help him, and he's like, I wouldn't do that. And then he goes, we're going to play a little game. And she goes, what kind of game? Oh, it's easy. It's trivia. And Steve's life depends on it. Turn off the lights. So he turns off the lights and everything. And then he starts asking her basic questions, kind of bullshitting her to get in, So he asked her, hey, I'll give you a free one. What's the killer in Halloween? And then that's what she said, Michael Myers. Then he throws a curveball, which I fucking love this. And as a horror fan, you have to appreciate this shit, right? So for Steve's life, he basically asks her, hey, who's the killer in Friday the 13th? And then she's screaming, Jason! It was Jason! He goes, nope, sorry, I'm afraid that's a wrong answer. She goes, I've seen that movie fucking 20, 30 times. Then that's when he basically brought it out to her and said, hey, if you would have seen it, you would have known Jason Voorhees only came in after the sequels. The original killer was Pamela Voorhees, his mother, right? And then she goes, well, she's all dumbfounded and everything. Then that's when he said, poor Steve, he's out of this round. And then you hear the gutting sound, then you see his entrails and shit and everything pop out like, whoa, okay, what the fuck? And keep in mind, this is only like 2 minutes into it, right? And so afterwards, then he's asked her another question. And then he's like, hey, there's 2 main doors to your house. Can you guess which door I'm at? So either way, he had intentions to go after her, right? And then, but before she can answer, she's just like, and then all of a sudden the fucking chair crashes through. At this point, the fucking popcorn's already burnt, so the fucking move's already ruined. So she's running around the house, and then that's when, Ghostface comes out, and then they have a scuffle and everything like that, and then that's when, she finally breaks away. She sees Steve dead right there, and then all of a sudden, she's running. Then you see fucking Ghostface come after her, and then as he's, like, coming up right behind her to grab her, he fucking looks at her for a second, has his knife, and because he was aiming. What I thought was interesting on this, he was aiming at a particular spot to hit, the artery on the shoulder, or to go for, like, the larynx, which I thought was pretty cool. I was like, oh, okay, this is a little interesting, right? And after that, they start struggling. Then it shows her parents' car coming in, and they pull up. And then, at this point, he had taken her down. He had crushed her throat and shit. They go into the house, and then they're like, what the fuck is going on, right? So they get on the phone to try to call, and then that's when they hear that Casey's like, because he takes her down in front of the door, like on the porch and shit. And then he's over there, like, stabbing her and shit. And, the whole time, they're picking up the phone trying to call. And if you live in the 90s, y'all know that if somebody's on the landline, you could hear them talk, but at the same time, like, it's weird. You had to live the time to understand it. So she's on the phone, and while her mom's picking up the phone, she could hear, like, everything happening, like, you know, and her screaming, and then all of a sudden it cuts out, you know, the phone dial. And then another cool little wink was that the father's like, hey, go down to the McKinseys. Which was a wink to originally in Halloween, when Laurie told that to the kids, hey, go down to the McKinseys. And so when that happened, she opened the door and she sees her daughter hanging from the swing set that was out there, you know, like the little 2x4 with the fucking rope. They're in the middle of nowhere, right? And all of a sudden the mom sees her daughter hanging with all of her, you know, intestines and shit hanging out. Then she starts screaming, ah! Then the fucking camera zooms all the way in, like, right up there, right? And it shows it. And then, boom, it just ends that scene. You know, the first 5 minutes, holy shit, that was pretty cool. You know, it's a pretty cool wink to horror fans because they throw out little tidbits about, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween and this and that. And then the story completely changes, and it follows a young girl named Cindy Prescott, who was a young Neve Campbell. And as I said, she was already an established actor because she was doing TV shows, you know, Party of Five and shit. It shows she's on the computer. She hears a noise. Her boyfriend jumps in. His name's Skeet Ulrich. That's the actor's name, but his name in the film was Billy. He jumps in and they start talking. Her dad comes in, and the way her room is set up in the house is that, like, if she opens the closet door, the door can't open. It like jams it and shit. So her dad tries opening the door, and they start talking. And her dad says, "Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and leave out of town. I just want to make sure you're okay. I heard screaming." And then it implies that Billy and Sydney, their boyfriend and girlfriend. But he's trying to be hot and heavy, you know. He's trying to break himself some, I guess, you know. Because he's over there trying to tell her, well, hey, you know, Exorcist came on. It got me thinking of you, you know. Like, stupid flirty puns. I thought that shit was funny, you know. But anyways, you know, he's trying to tell her, like, hey, we started hot and heavy, and then we kind of died down. Let's go, you know, all the way. So they kind of implied it, and then she's like, no, I can't. And then she's like, would you settle for PG-13? He's like, what's that? You know? It's teenager slashers. You got to remember that, right? So anyways, after that, she's going to school. She meets up with Rose McGowan's character, whose name is Tatum. And they're best friends. And so when she meets up over there at school in Woodsboro, actually in California, they start talking and say, what the fuck is all these cops over here doing? And then that's when Tatum tells her, well, do you remember, you know, Casey, Drew Barrymore's character, and her boyfriend Steve? They were murdered last night, and they don't know what the hell's going on because it's one of the most gruesome murders they've seen in a while, and they want to ask everybody, all the students and shit like that. And so, you know, they go into school and everything. They see people, like, all kind of hysteria about it. And then it shows a scene later on where they're all together. And then you get to meet all the different characters, right? So you meet Randy. He's he's kind of like every horror fan of us, you know? He's played by Jamie Kennedy. And at the time, he was already an established star, too, you know? Then you have the guy who played Stu. His name is Matthew Lillard. Everybody knows him because, you know, later on he became well known for playing Shaggy in the Scooby-Doo movies and stuff. Then, you know, right off the bat, you already have, you know, Rose McGowan, and you have Neve Campbell. So, I mean, it was a pretty decent, well-off cast. It really was, you know. And then later on, you see all the news reporters. One of the main news reporter, her name is Gail Weathers, who's played by Courtney Cox, which we all know her because, I mean, she's done tons of TV shows and other movies and stuff like that. But I thought it was pretty cool is that they start talking. And they start saying, okay, well, what's going on with this? How can anybody do this? And stuff like that. Then Randy starts fucking with Stu, and he's like, well, did the police know that you dated her for a second? He's like, well, they don't need to know that, you know. So kind of like, oh, okay, something's a little off here on this. And then that's when Randy basically told Stu, well, you dated her for like 2 minutes, and then she dumped you. Then Tatum turns around like, I thought you dumped her for me. You know, they started dicking around. And then it made, you know, Sydney feel uncomfortable. Now, the backstory with Sydney is that her mother was murdered, you know, a year before. And this story, like, no joke, it's very simple, like most horror films and most slasher films, but it's very complex if you break it down. Like, whoa, okay, this is kind of a little out there. Sydney's mom was basically raped and murdered. It already went to trial and everything. They found the guy, Cotton Weary, and that guy, he's actually played by Lee Schreiber, who, you know, already, like I said, his established star. It's pretty interesting on that, you know? And they didn't show him much other than the fact that he was going to prison, like in the TV scenes and shit like that. So after that, you know, they kind of went off their own ways and stuff. And then inside the school, you know, like everybody was just going crazy over it, you know, running around wearing the Ghostface masks and shit like that. And then, you know, afterwards it showed that school was done. Sydney goes home, and then that's when her and Tatum start talking like, hey, everything okay? Yeah, it's just, you know, it's deja vu, remind me of all the shit that happened last year this time. Can't believe it's a year. So at this point, she's, you know, home alone in her nice big house in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, she's just kind of thinking of things, how it was before, how her mom was murdered, right? And so, you know, that's when she starts talking to Tatum again. She's like, oh, okay, I'll see you when you get here then. Then she gets a phone call, right? She gets a phone call who's,
Tatum, just
you
get
know,
in the car.
obviously Ghostface. And that's when he's like, well, I don't know who I'm trying to reach, but I want to get to know you. Like, he's playing it off, right? He starts talking to her. He goes, well, I want to see who I'm looking at. And she thinks it's Randy. So she goes outside, and she's like, well, I don't see you. Where the fuck are you? You know? And then he's like, well, I see you. Then she's like, all right, really? Really? What am I doing? She was fucking picking her nose. And she's like, hello, what am I doing? Yeah, all right, whatever, Randy. And then that's when he started fucking with her, like, you know, oh, yeah, your mom didn't say that when I gutted her. And she called him a cretin, which I don't know what the fuck that was. I was watching this film with a buddy of mine, The Last Unicorn, and I was like, what is a cretin? He's like, look it up. I never got a chance to look it up, but that shit was funny. I was like, what the fuck? So as she goes in the house, and all of a sudden Ghostface pops out of her closet, tries to get her. They had a struggle and shit, right? She runs up to her room. She finally gets away, and then the phone line is busted, right? What I thought was cool, you know, she gets on the computer, and back in the 90s, you know, when you had the old school computer, the TTYs, which are like the telephones for the deaf community that can't talk over the phone, you could type it, right? So the program was open on the web browser, so that's when, you know, she dialed 911 on her computer because of, you know, the whole TTY thing. Then all of a sudden, Ghostface was gone, and at the same time, you see Billy pop up the window, which is like, whoa, what the fuck is this, right? And then as she's hugging him, saying, no, he's still here. He's like, no, he's gone. And then all of a sudden, a cell phone pops out of his pocket, like, what the fuck? Like, okay, something's weird. And then that's when she starts to freak out. She's running down the stairs. And then all of a sudden, you know, she runs into Officer Dewey, who's actually Tatum's brother. And then, you know, he's holding the fucking Ghostface mask up. And then she's like, ah! You know, there was kind of some dark humor in this, which I thought was pretty cool, you know? And so they show the next scene. They're arresting Billy and everything. And then Tatum finally pulls up. And, you know, Tatum and Dewey, you know, they're brother and sisters. So they had that sibling love, you know? Like, yes, doofus, I know. She's supposed to stay with us. And then the cops are basically, you know, asking all the questions like, hey, you know, are you sure you're okay? What's going on? What's going on with this? Gail Weathers is trying to get involved, and then everyone's kind of brushing her off like, you bitch! You know, and Gail Weathers, her story, how she's involved in all this, is that when her mother was murdered, and there was like the biggest trial, they played it off like it was like the O.J. Simpson trial, right? And, you know, she wrote a book. She talked to the main person who was, you know, getting in trouble for it, you know, Cotton. And she basically made up all these different theories that pissed off Cindy. And that's why they had, like, you know, bad blood between each other, right? So they're at the police station. They show that he's talking to, you know, Billy and Billy's dad. And then, you know, that's when the sheriff is telling him, like, hey, I don't know what the hell you have a cell phone for, boy, but we're going to look into them records. And then Billy's like, I tell you, Sheriff, I didn't kill anybody. Which, I don't know how the hell they had a twang that came out, but okay. And so the sheriff office is set up where you can see windows and shit between, so he keeps turning around and staring at Sydney, and he's like, Sydney, I didn't do it! Then afterwards, you see Gail Weathers outside. She's trying to break in. Well, not break in. She's like, well, I'm fucking Gail Weathers. They're going to let me go in, you know? Then they stopped her, and then that's when, you know, Dewey, Sydney, and Tatum, they were leaving from the back, and they said, okay, you all can go home. That's when Gail Weathers came up to her, and they started talking, and then Cindy's like, no, I'll talk. How's everything with the book? Oh, it's great. I'll send you a copy. And she fucking knocks her out. Bam! Right? You know, they talk shit about it, you know, where Tatum's like, yeah, you know, I'll send you a copy. Bam! Bitch got down. You know, it's just dark humor right there, you know? So Dewey comes in, checks on Sid and everything. He's like, hey, if you need anything, I'm next door, you know, because they're all living in the same house, brother and sister. And then all of a sudden, what I thought was pretty cool is that Tatum's mom is actually the mom from the Gremlins, which I was like, oh shit, that's pretty cool, you know, cool, another little wink to another horror film, right? she tells Sydney, hey, there's a phone call for you. It's your dad. She's like, oh, my dad, what? So she goes and tries to pick up, and it's Ghostface. And he's like, got the wrong guy again. Poor Billy boyfriend. He can't catch a break with you now, can he? And, you know, it's just the fact that he was fucking with her. Because this whole movie goes, you know, who did it? Who's the killer? Who's the killer? It plays off that aspect really good, right? So after that, they release Billy. They go back to school and everything. And, you know, that's when Stu and Tatum, they're kind of like fucking with Sydney. Well, mostly Stu. And he's like, well, have you talked to Billy? No, not since that day. And he's like, well, not since you turned him into Candyman. Which I was like, oh shit, another horror film right there, you know? It was pretty cool. And so that's when she's running off, and then she bumps into Billy. And Billy and her, they kind of argue about things where he's like, well, because the story with Billy now, right? His mom and dad got into a divorce, and his mom took off because his dad was cheating on her with Sydney's mom, of all things. That's the twist, right? Cindy doesn't know that, but Billy does, right? And so he basically broke it down to her like, hey, I know you're acting this way because it's already been a year. I want my girlfriend back. And then she's like, well, how the fuck could you say that? He's like, well, when my mom left me and my dad, you know, she just upped and left. She's like, well, yeah, you can go and visit her. She's not in a box buried somewhere. And they were bickering and stuff. Then she goes into the bathroom. And in the bathroom, she hears all these other girls, you know, it's high school. They're talking shit. Well, I think Sydney went crazy because, you know, going crazy is the new trend, you know. It was really like, whoa, kind of harsh. But, you know, it's stereotypical 90s. That's how it was. It really was, you know, especially with the fucking bright colors and shit and everything that they had and the style. I mean, it was hella 90s. You had to live it to understand it, you know, like I said, in the 80s. But anyway, she goes in the bathroom, you know, hides in the stall, waits till the girls leaves. And then after that, then she comes out, she's, you know, washing her face and shit. And then all of a sudden she hears a noise. Then you see these boots come down. And then you see the fucking Ghostface costume come down with it. And all of a sudden she's like, oh shit. And then Ghostface attacks her. And she runs out of the bathroom. She leaves all of her shit too. She runs out, you know. And then that's when, you know, at the same time, you know, kids are still being stupid, running around with the fucking Ghostface costume. And the principal of all people is the Fonzie. Yep, Henry Winkler was in this film. He played the fucking principal, which I thought was pretty cool too. So he got the two kids, and he told them, hey, you little shits, this is fucked up. You both are expelled, you know? And, you know, stereotypical 90s, they're saying, but it's not fair. He's like, okay. He closes the door. He goes, you know what would be fair to you? How about slicing you fucking open and hanging you from your own intestines? That'll make you show you what little shits you are. You know, and it showed that he had these fucking old school sharp scissors, and you could hear like, shh, 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 you know. He grabs one of the Ghostface masks and cuts it and shit. And then it shows that he kicks the kids out. And then after the whole incident with Sydney, he basically said, okay, well, school is, you know, closed down until further notice till we find out what's going on. Then that's when Stu's like, oh, we're going to have a party at my house. Fuck it, right? So after everything all went on, you know, you see a little bit of scenes of, you know, Gale Weathers trying to talk to Dewey about everything and trying to, you know, butter him up to get info, right? Well, that's all going on. Then it shows that they go to the store, and then you hear Tatum and Sydney start talking about, you know, well, maybe you should give Billy a chance, and this and this and that, and, you know, she's starting to feel bad because she hasn't gone all the way with him, and, you know, all that stuff, right? And then the sheriff, you know, he basically tells Dewey, hey, don't leave her out of your sight. Make sure you watch over her. So after the whole, you know, being at the store scene and everything, they're talking all that, and then the sheriff is talking to Dewey. Then it goes into Randy's character. Now, Randy, he works at a video store, which is so badass, you know, because at the time, video stores were fucking everywhere, right? He works at a video store, and he starts talking to Stu. And then, you know, he's telling Stu, like, hey, Billy over there, man, if he's, like, prime suspect number one, I wouldn't be standing over there. Well, why not? Well, he's standing in the horror movie section. Some kind of shit, I would say, right? And he's like, well, why is he standing over there in the horror section? And he's like, well, the cops let him go because they'd never fucking watch horror films. This is prom night all over again. Everybody's a suspect. Like, he's fucking being loud at this, you know? And then all of a sudden, he's like, besides, you know, there's a good reason that Stu probably went crazy because, you know, Sydney wouldn't have sex with him, right? And then all of a sudden, he turns around and Billy bumps into him. And then Stu comes up right behind him and shit. And then all of a sudden, Billy's like, well, what if you are the suspect? He goes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I would be it because I'm a horror movie fan, and I know that I could be a suspect. And they're all like, well, what would be your motive? He's like, it's a new millennium. He goes, you can get away with shit like that. Which I thought was kind of funny as fuck because, you know, with horror films, they kind of, you see the evolution of them. You see them change. That's why this film still withstands the test of time. It really does, you know? So later on, after all that whole scene and through the day and everything, it shows the town locking up, everything. Then Dewey takes him out to the party. And then you see, you know, him dropping off Tatum and Sydney. He says, hey, I'll be outside making sure everything's good. Now, keep in mind, these are high school kids. They're drinking and shit, having a good time. They're all talking shit. And then all of a sudden, Gale Weathers pulls up right behind. He starts talking to Gale and everything. Then all of a sudden, Gale comes with this idea like, oh, hey, if you get me into the house, maybe I can sneak in a camera, right? So that's what happens. They eventually start talking about horror films and shit like that. Randy, you know, being the horror fan that he is, similar like me, right? They start watching horror films and shit and drinking beer. Then all of a sudden it shows, Dewey, he comes in, and then he's like, you know, bringing in Gale, and then his sister's like, hey, what the fuck is she doing here? She's with me. You know, he's all happy because, you know, he's got a date, you know? But anyways, as they're talking and everything, you know, Gale's kind of walking around. She has her hands behind her back and shit, and she slides in the fucking camera right above the VCR. And then after that, they walk away. She goes back into the van and everything, and then that's when, you know, she finds it from her cameraman. She's like, hey, we got it rolling? He's like, yeah. He goes, fuck, it's got a 30-second delay. You know, so she's like, all right, just fucking film it. So they film the whole party. Well, that's going on. Then Stu, he says, okay, Tatum, go get me a beer. So Tatum goes out there, and she starts grabbing a beer in the garage and shit. And that's when Ghostface comes out, you know, and he closes the garage. And then she's looking at him like, what the fuck? She's like, all right, Ghostface, you know, am I supposed to be the helpless victim? And then he's just, you know, shaking his head and shit. And then she's like, all right. And then that's when he starts getting physical. And then she's like, all right, cut it, Casper. That was a cut. They struggled and shit. And then finally, what I loved about Rose McGowan's character, she was fucking tough. She was this tiny thing, but she was tough. She was throwing the fucking beer bottles at him. Fuck her! You know? And as she, you know, finally takes him down, there's a little doggy door on this garage, which is fucking weird in the first place, but go figure, right? So she tries to squeeze through it, but she gets stuck. And as she gets stuck, Ghostface, he turns on the garage. You hear the garage go, and as it pulls her up, it like smashes her face and then jams, right? And then she's stuck, hanging like this. What I want to know is, what fucking garage motor is that strong to hold somebody up? I hit my fucking head on my garage, and that fucking thing just falls apart. Like, what the fuck? You know, but I thought it was cool nonetheless, right? So anyways, they go back to the party. They're all talking shit and everything. Then Stu invited Billy, right? And the whole premise of this is that Cindy only went because she didn't want to deal with Billy, and Stu and Billy were friends. You didn't see how tight-knit they were until later on, but you find out that, you know, he did invite Billy over. And he's like, you know, hey, you guys can go in my parents' room, talk, whatever, you know. So they go in the room and talk. And then you hear Randy in the corner like, damn, there goes my chance with Sid. I'm going to go check on him. You know, because I guess he had a crush on her or whatever. So it shows a scene that Sydney and Billy, they go upstairs, they talk. Then they go all the way and have sex. And after that, then it's just like, you see, like, everybody all watching the horror films and stuff. And then it kind of changes a little bit. Because then they get a phone call that there's a random car in the forest, right? So Dewey goes and tells Gale, hey, there's a random car in the forest. You want to walk with me? So they walk down over there. And as they're walking, you know, they're watching the horror films, and it shows Randy, and he's like, you don't know the rules? You gotta know the rules on horror films. Rule number 1, never have sex. You know, then rule number 2, don't say you're coming back, because when you say you're coming back, you'd never come back. And then, you know, you see Stu get up, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna go get a beer. You want one? Yeah, sure. I'll be right back. Everyone's just fucking going crazy, dude. It was, you know, it's true. If you're a horror movie fan, you know the rules just from watching so many of them, you know? And when that happened, then all of a sudden he gets a phone call, and then that's when somebody tells him, hey, the principal got gutted up over here at school, you know? And they're hanging him off on the post. Because earlier in the day, you know, when the principal was by himself, you know, he was wearing the mask and he kept hearing noises. Finally, you know, he goes back into his office and shit. And then all of a sudden, Ghostface comes out of the corner and just fucking stabs the shit out of him. And this is after he already kicked everybody out of school, saying school was closed, you know? And anyways, so all the kids wanted to go see it, so they jump in the car, they peel out, they almost hit Dewey and Gale. Then they roll off on the side of the road. Then they find the car, what it was, and it's actually Sydney's dad's car. Then they start running back into the house. And then that's when, you know, after they had sex, Billy and Sydney, all of a sudden, you know, she's still asking him questions like, hey, who'd you call? Who'd you call, right? And, you know, he was like, well, I had to call my dad. And she's like, huh, that's kind of weird because I would have thought you would have called me and say it wasn't me just to throw me off or whatever, you know? Then that's when Ghostface comes out and stabs him and shit. And he chases after her and everything. And all of a sudden, you know, she goes outside and everything. And then that's when, you know, Ghostface is on the loose. You know, he's chasing after her and shit. He kills the cameraman and everything. All hell breaks loose at this point, right? But the ending, the big climax of this is basically, you know, she's trying to find out who it is, right? Twist in all of this is that Billy and Stu were the main killers the whole time. Like, they had planned this shit out and everything. And the way that it gives it away is just the fact that, you know, here, you know, Randy, he's breaking down the door, and all of a sudden Billy, he lets him in, and then she's like, Billy, you're okay. And then all of a sudden he pulls out the gun, boom, shoots fucking Randy, and Randy goes down, oh, because he shoots him in the shoulder. And then that's when, you know, he admits the whole plan. He's like, cornstarch, like what they used in Carrie's Blood. And I was like, oh shit, another horror film they reference, right? So then he breaks down the whole story and says, you know, how he was pissed off about how her mom was screwing around with his dad, caused his parents to break up, and then all of a sudden, you know, they said, oh yeah, by the way, we got your dad here. So they pull out the dad, you know, that they had kidnapped him and apparently kept him quiet until that big moment, right? And then that's when they talked about how they had a voice changer. And then, you know, then you find out the other twist that Stu was involved, which is like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, this simple story just becomes very complex at this point. And, you know, Stu, he had no involvement other than the fact that he wanted to help out Billy, right? And so they said, okay, we're going to kill everybody and then make ourselves look like the heroes. And, you know, then she's basically saying, you guys are fucking psychos. Then he says one of the most craziest quotes on there that, you know, movies don't make psychos and the movies make psychopaths more creative or something like that, you know. And all of a sudden it shows that he's stabbing the shit out of Stu. And then Stu's like, whoa, hold on, man. Like, I'm getting fucking woozy here. You know, and that's basically the whole twist in it, is that they were going to kill everybody, hurt themselves, and make it look like they were the heroes, right? At this point, you know, Gail and Dewey, they had came at the wrong time because they got fucked up and everything. Then Gail, you know, she tries to get in the middle and she has the gun, and then she's like trying to shoot at them. And then that's when fucking Billy knocks her out and shit and says, well, stupid bitch, you had the safety on. You know, it built up to this whole complexity of the story where, you know, Cindy finally gets away and she hides, you know, with her dad and everything, using the voice caller. And then that's what she calls the, you know, their cell phones. And then they start snapping, and then you see Stu's like, did you really call the cops? You bet your ass I did. My parents are going to be so mad at me. You know, it had a little bit of dark humor. Then eventually it shows that she jumps out of the closet in the fucking suit, stabs Billy. You think Billy's down. And then Stu and her, they, you know, they started having a fist fight and shit like that. He takes her down. She goes right over there where they were watching the film on the TV. The old cathode ray tubes, you know, the big-ass ones, the dinosaur TVs, right? She, you know, knocks him down, and then all of a sudden she throws a fucking TV on his face. Like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, you can't do that now these days with these flat-screen TVs. That shit's like glass. It just break. But this shit fell on him and shocked the fuck out of him, so he was done, you know? And then all of a sudden, it's almost like a happy ending because, you know, Randy and everybody, they're all alive and everything. And then all of a sudden, you know, then you see Billy, he jumps up, like tries to, and he takes down Sydney, and then he's ready to stab her and shit, and then he gets shot by Gail, right? And then that's when Randy and all of them get up, and they're like, okay, be careful. He might come back out for one more scare. As he, you know, fucking, Sydney shoots him in the head, boom! I mean, that's just, that was a trend in it, you know? And then the movie ends with, you know, basically they all survived. You know, Randy, he survived with the gunshot wound. Sydney, you know, she survived that whole madness and ordeal. Stu and Billy, you know, they died from, you know, being stupid and all this. And it was a very, very complex ending. Like, it was like, whoa. So you knew you had, you know, Wes Craven's hands all over on this, right? But it was a very interesting film. You know, because it was very well written, you know, because Wes Craven didn't write it. It was actually written by Kevin Williamson. And when he wrote this story, he got the idea from, you know, the real serial killings from the Gainesville Ripper. And the Gainesville Ripper, you know, the serial killer, his name was Danny Rawling. And what this guy did, he went and attacked, you know, college kids. And it inspired Kevin Williamson to write the story of Scream. And when he sold the idea and everything, Wes Craven wanted all in on it, you know. And boy, man, did they make a home run with this, because this first film, I mean, it was just so huge. It brought, like I said, it basically, in the 90s, like, this film is what jump-started all the horror movies. Like, this film saved horror films all together, you know. Otherwise, they all be straight to DVD, straight to VHS, all that shit, you know. But it really regenerated it, you know. And it doesn't get a lot of credit for it. There was, you know, so many winks to all these horror films. This film was basically by the horror fans for the horror fans, you know. And then the fact that she had so many, like, random cameos in there, you know. You see the janitor, he's dressed up in a Freddy sweater, and his name was Freddy. So Henry Winkler comes out and he's like, ah, fucking bricks. He's like, who, me? No, not you, Freddy. You know, so they had cool little winks. Linda Blair was in it. She played one of the, you know, news reporters. Linda Blair, you know, she's from The Exorcist. You know, she played Reagan, which I thought was pretty cool. Like, oh, shit. So this was pretty cool how they did all these little winks, you know. And as I said, I mean, the best way to put it, it was by the horror fans for the horror fans, you know. And they really put their touch onto it. I mean, obviously now it's a little dated with the 90s and all that shit, but everything, you know, but it's still a great film that holds up, you know. Obviously, we all know what happens later on. I won't go in too much into the sequels. You know, they did a Scream 2, which was just as great as the first one. Scream 3 was, you know, debatable. Some people loved it. Most people hated it. That was kind of that film, right? Then they came back later on with Scream 4, which was basically, you know, it picks up right after part 3, you know. But they modernized it for the new millennium, for the 2010s on up, you know. And they did a great job on that as well. But, I mean, just the fact that it was such an iconic thing in 1996, it carried on. Interesting thing to note, though, is that the voice that you hear on the phone, it's actually not by Billy or anybody, or by Stu, you know, by any of those actors or anything. It was actually played by a completely different actor. His name is Roger Jackson. He wasn't on set when they did this. The actors never met him. So when, you know, they're talking to him in the voice and everything like that, that's a real reaction, you know, trying to act and everything, because they'd never met him. And the fact that, you know, he was able to do this real live voice, he didn't need a voice changer and shit. They didn't fuck with audio or anything. He just carried it on naturally. And obviously, later on, they still brought him back to keep that same voice from the sequels. And like I said, you know, there's so many other little tidbits I can go on this, you know. Because of this film, we have caller fucking ID on our phones, you know, whether it be on the house phone and then later on, obviously, travel on to cell phones. That was kind of interesting, you know. The idea of Ghostface, they got the idea from, you know, the painting from the Scream painting, you know. And then they basically decided, okay, well, we're kind of going to give it a weird looking look where it's like happy but sad and crying at the same time, you know. A lot of macabre kind of put into it, you know. And it's kind of interesting to note on that. Like, wow, they really built this from the ground up, you know? And I thought what also blew my mind, too. I was actually, when I was researching for this, you know, they said originally they had the actors in mind was Molly Ringwald. She played, you know, Cindy Prescott. And they wanted Ben Affleck to play Billy. Which is like, whoa, what the fuck? That'd be a completely different movie, you know? I'm glad they didn't go that route because, I mean, it would have been completely different. It wouldn't have been as iconic as it is now. But, you know, for Scream, it was a great fucking film. Most people tend to overlook it because I know in the 90s, like, a lot of the horror films are just, they're few and far between. They really are. And to this day, you know, Scream still holds up for what it is, you know. Even though it was released in 1996, it still holds up as being this, you know, great fucking slasher film. It really does, you know. I mean, you can watch it any given time, any decade. I mean, it still applies. It's pretty cool, you know. But thank you guys for tuning in for episode 47 on Scream, and I'll catch y'all next time, as always. The fuck? That's kind of odd. Let me answer this real quick.
Who is this? This is the last person you're ever gonna see alive.
Fuck that. I'll catch y'all next time, guys.